All righty. All right, I think we are set. Okay, I think we are. Yes. All right. So, good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for joining STEM Noir and our Black Women in STEM Week. Right now, we are about to have our panel talk about their journey through STEM. For those of you who are tuning in with us, please, feel free to ask questions for the panelists at any point. So, if you are on YouTube or on Facebook, just type in the comments your questions. You can direct it to the entire panel or any particular panelist, and we will try to get those questions answered during this time. So without further ado, I will allow our panelists to introduce themselves. So first we have Ms. Chandria Stallworth. So please introduce yourself, ma'am.
Hi, you all. I am Chandria Stallworth. I'm a fifth-year PhD candidate at Mississippi State University, where I study weed physiology and genetics. I am a graduate of Fort Valley State University. It's a small HBCU in Georgia, and I also have my master's from Auburn in plant breeding and genetics.
All right, thank you. Dr. Tolson.
Hi, everybody. I'm Chanel. You might notice me or remember me from the STEMbassy public health hat. I am a biologist, cell molecular biology by trade and by education. My undergraduate degrees are in biology and MB3, which is molecular biology, biochemistry, and bioinformatics. My master's in science education, molecular biology, and my doctorate is a DRPH, a doctorate in public health. And I focused on capacity building and healthcare and STEM and how they affect the diaspora. Oh, and I currently work in human health and toxicology.
All right, thank you. Ms. Kelly Knight.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kelly Knight. I'm an associate professor of forensic science at George Mason University. My specialty is forensic DNA. So before I came to Mason, I worked full-time in a crime lab. Yes, like CSI, if that's what you want to say. My bachelor's degree is in chemistry. My master's degree is in forensic science. And now, because I like torture, I'm in a PhD program studying science education research.
All right, and last but not least, Dr. Corey Grayson.
Hey everybody, my name is Dr. Corey with a K. I am now a postdoc fellow at University of Michigan in the chemical engineering department, but I got my PhD in biomedical engineering at Cornell University as well as my master's, and I did my undergrad in chemistry at my lovely HBCU, Norfolk State University.
Woo woo! Shout out to the HBCUs. All right. So again, if you're just joining us, we are here with our Black Women in STEM Week with STEM Noir. If you are joining us, whether it's through Facebook or YouTube, please ask any questions that you have in the comments and we'll be sure to get to them. But first question we have for the panelists is, who influenced you to pursue STEM? And we'll start with Chandria.
Who influenced me? I would have to say my mom started it all off. My mom is a nurse. She has her RN, and I just remember when I was in middle school watching her study. She would practice on me when she was learning new techniques, and it led me to believe that I wanted to be a doctor. I thought I wanted to be a medical doctor. Now I am just on to a different kind of doctor. And my journey through STEM definitely helped me realize that you don't have to have an MD or a PharmD or a JD to be a doctor.
All right, Dr. Tolson.
I don't have quite a similar background, but just maybe a touch. So I've always been interested in STEM. My grandfather would say, like, since I was knee high to a grasshopper. So, because we're country. And so I've always had a STEM I guess, an innateness, like it just drawn to it. So I'll always be outside playing with bugs and frogs. When I was a kid, I had the little black bag with the little fake syringes in it. And when I was a kid, the doctor's bags had the circle thing you put on your forehead, like a mirror you could see inside people's throat when you put the flashlight down your throat and say, with the tongue depressor. And I just was always interested in it. And so I gave out medicine. There were orange Tic Tacs. It had to be the orange kind or it wasn't real medicine. And when someone had a boo-boo, I'll put, we had Flintstone Band-Aids. So I'll give them a Flintstone Band-Aid, and then you kiss the boo-boo and you take 2 of the orange Tic Tacs, and that was their medicine. And so I also wanted to be a doctor. And long story short, I wrote about this when we told our STEM stories earlier this week. I took the MCATs, applied to medical school, got the interview, and I got waitlisted. And I didn't realize that waitlisted meant apply again. I thought they were just being nice when they said, try, if you don't get a call back in the next month or 2, try again next year. I thought that was a nice way of saying, sorry, kid, you didn't make it. And I didn't have a mentor to tell me, no, they want you to apply again. There were no spaces. I ended up falling back into research, loved it, went the DRPH route, and now here I am doing public health. And so I take STEM and my background in medicine and pharmaceuticals and now toxicology, and I use that to shape how we educate the public, specifically the diaspora, our public, and our community, and help them try to have more healthy outcomes. And so I take science and explain complex and not so easy to understand concepts and break it down so that our community can understand it and move forward with better health outcomes.
All right. Thank you. Kelly?
Yeah, so I first got interested in STEM because of my dad. He was an air traffic controller. So I was kind of a space and aviation nerd early on. And he never really pushed what most would consider typical girl stereotypes on me, like forcing, I mean, I love dolls and stuff, but he bought me the typical STEM toys that a lot of people don't normally buy girls. So he bought me rockets, he bought me toy airplanes, he made me a private laboratory in our basement. And these are things that a lot of people just assume girls aren't interested in. But he really took the time to expose me to those things, and it really made my interest go through the roof. I was a space camp nerd. I was the only little Black girl there, but I still enjoyed it. And then, it started there, but my interest in science and tech and all those things just continuously evolved. And I don't think I really knew what I wanted to do until the middle of college. I mean, I went through the whole gamut of things I wanted to do. I wanted to be a veterinarian until I experienced my first euthanization experience. And then I was like, that's out. I wanted to be a doctor, all different careers within STEM. And then when I was in high school, I had an anatomy and physiology teacher who did this mock crime scene laboratory. And it's funny because it kind of dates how long ago this was. It was a blood typing lab, and nobody in forensics does blood typing, like ABO typing. And I really, really enjoyed that laboratory. And I really loved experiencing how all of these hard sciences I was learning actually had like a real life application. Like, how you take a class and you're like, why do I care about this molecular formula? Why do I care about all these things? And then forensics really showed me how you can actually take all of these things that you're learning and actually apply it to something that's really cool and interesting. So when I started in undergrad, I still kind of had that doctor fever in my head. And for a while, I pursued that. And then I decided that wasn't for me. But then I remembered that experience in high school. And so I majored in chemistry, but my minor was in forensic chemistry. And then my senior year, I did an internship in a forensic lab, and that really solidified it for me. After I did my internship, I was like, all right, that's it, that sold me. So it's all history after that.
Thank you. And Dr. Corey?
I think recently I've given more and more credit to my mother. So I'm a military brat, parents were in the Army. And so, I think we lost Chandria. She'll come back. So with that, they were just more about discipline and working hard. But when it came to actually doing like science projects, my mom would help me and my brother. So my brother would procrastinate and wait to the last minute. And so she'd be like, okay, so when's your project? Be like a week or two from now? He's like, no, tomorrow. So my mom would just like put together science projects in like a night. And then she would like give them to my brother and he would win first place. And so one of them was like a tooth model where she showed like tooth decay. And my dad and her came up with a song that went along with it that we still use to this day. And then another one was like showing mold over a period of time. So she bought like regular bagels and then she bought like raisin bagels. And she just told my brother to take a picture in front of them and showing the mold over time. I mean, seeing that kind of like ingenuity and like innovation as a young kid and seeing a mom like interested in what you're doing and in your science projects, regardless if it was like last minute or not, really kind of like sparked that interest in me to figure out and draw me a little bit more to science. I don't think I really got into science until I hit high school and I took AP chemistry and fell in love with chemistry. And then when I got to college, I had this no nonsense chemistry professor who was like, Corey, you're going to be a chemistry major. And I'm like, okay. And then after doing research internships throughout my whole undergrad career, and then I realized, okay, maybe this is the route that I want to go. And so I wanted to do MD, PhD like Kelly. At first I wanted to be a massage therapist, and then I wanted to be a chiropractor, then I'm like, I'm gonna be a doctor. And then I shot at OBGYN and realized childbirth's not that great looking. And so I ended up doing the PhD route. And then only 2 months ago became Dr. Corey. So that's a little bit of my journey.
Thanks. Excellent. Thank you for sharing. So we do have a question from the audience. I'm going to show it on the screen. So someone asked, what advice do you have for a girl who wants to be an inventor?
I would say start now. There are so many things that inventing tie in, baking. If you are interested in chemistry, if you come up with different recipes on your own, you are an inventor. Don't let yourself be limited, and don't let people tell you that you have to go to school to be an inventor. Don't let them guide you down a path, because there's so many ways to get to that end point. And make sure that you network and ask questions, because again, somebody might have the keys to the door that you're trying to get into.
I would also like to add is buying and purchasing like little kits. You can have Arduino kits and coding kits that are available. And usually a lot of programs will buy them and give them to kids. And so I think if you can have like a little bit of hands-on tinkering, or even join like local maker spaces where you can build drones, or you can build a robot, or just at least have some type of hand-on experience with actually working with electronics, if that's just the way you want to go. But let's say if you want to invent products or skincare, and then you can talk to a formulation chemist or reach out to brands, and they might be interested in helping you, or maybe having you come on and collaborate. So there's just so many things. You just really have to reach out, kind of do a little bit of research and see what's out there to kind of get your inventor hat on and get ready.
One thing I would say is definitely look into attending STEM programs, after school programs, summer programs, because I know, for example, I run a summer STEM program, and it's very hands-on, and our participants get lots of chances to do things from scratch, to be really inventive in their own activities and projects. And we have a lot of students who get these ideas, and they get the foundational knowledge both just by going to that STEM camp or program. And so they get these ideas and they can then follow through with them, which is my second point of advice, is if you have an idea, see it through. Because I know my dad, he's the type of guy where I feel like he was a natural born inventor. He always had these ideas, but he never followed through with them. And then 10 years later, he'd be like, I remember I thought of that and somebody took my idea. And it could be something so small. I mean, think about all of the things you see on like these infomercials where someone's selling like a blanket with arms. I mean, come on now. How hard was that to come up with? But they're making millions of dollars off of it. So don't think that any idea is too small to follow through with. Follow through with it, and have somebody help you figure out what you need to do in order to get the rights to having that product be yours and yours only, and then make that money.
All right, thank you. We have another question. And this question asks, was it ever hard for you all to pick something you really like?
Yes, it was very hard. As I described earlier, I went from a full, I wouldn't say 180, but it definitely changed, massage therapy, chiropractor, medical doctor, then to a PhD. I want people to know that when you're going on this journey, you're going to evolve. Your interests are going to change. You're not often going to stick to one thing. You might not even hear about your field that you're interested in until maybe you hit your mid to late 20s. And then all of a sudden you want to make a career change. And so it's actually constantly evolving. Like, even though I got my degree in biomedical engineering, now I worked in a chemical engineering space. In the future, I might move on to science policy and totally leave the research behind. So it's always like constantly evolving. You just have to keep your options open and just understand and see what you're interested in and just follow that path. I think you will be led down that path if you are meant to go down it. So just follow the signs, follow the mentors, the people that are teaching you and helping you, and then you'll be able to find out what you really, really like.
I would say for me, it was hard being on the STEM side and knowing that those are your strengths. But when you get to college and they are showing you a list of majors, you can almost feel overwhelmed because in science, technology, engineering, mathematics, there are so many different career paths and fields that you can go in. It's not uncommon for you to have somebody that their majors listed as pre-med, but they can be pre-med chemistry. They can be pre-med biology. For me, I started off pre-med and I was pre-med biology. And I knew that in my mind, I wanted to be a doctor, but not necessarily what kind. I used my unrestricted electives to help me kind of hone in on what was important, what I was passionate about. So I took a plant science class under the guise that our plant science department was a pre-pharmacy program. And you took maybe 1 or 2 extra biology classes. So I was gung-ho. I was like, okay, I've already started. It's not bad changing my major because a lot of these classes are still going to come over. And then for me, I took that class and never looked back. I didn't go to pharmacy school. I did try my hand at public health and I was looking at epidemiology. Didn't work for me. I really like plants. I really had to sit down and I was like, I want to feed the world. At first, I went into public health because I thought I needed to be on that side to see how people eat and what impacts the world. And then finally, I realized and had a mentor that helped me see that feeding the world, again, is like choosing a major. There's so many ways that you can feed the world.
Excellent. Thank you.
I'm going to totally back up and piggyback on what Corey and what Chandria are saying, because I think that something that's very important as far as my STEM journey, what happened to me, something that's similar to happened to Chandria and Corey, things changed, whether by happenstance or purposefully. One thing I do want to say is when it comes to trying to hone in what you want to do, I think it's super important that you find a mentor, somebody that's going to be able to talk you through it, because sometimes when we miss out on things because we don't know about the opportunities. And so I'll share quickly something that happened to me. And when I was working in lab, I was doing it because I thought that it was what you're supposed to do. Hey, I finished all my coursework. Now I'm going to do something in the lab. What I didn't know, I wasn't aware of, the reason why people working in lab, being TAs or being a lab assistants or getting those extra, in the summertime, those extra hours in the lab is because it helps to get internships. It helps to get in places you want to go later on. And again, I didn't have a mentor to tell me that. And so I lost out on a lot of opportunities that may have helped me do some other things, maybe even get into medical school if I had those extra opportunities. Because I didn't know about them. So I think it's super important that no matter what it is you start off as, find a mentor, because by happenstance or again, by having someone walk you through it, you may figure out that, hey, like Chandria just said, I wasn't into everything and that wasn't for me. And so she did a trial and error process. So try to seek out a mentor and maybe that will help you along your way also.
I think that's actually a really good segue to our next question of, did anyone have a STEM mentor who shared or shares your intersectional identity? And so for those who may not be familiar with that particular language, intersectional or intersectionality essentially means that we are Black women. So was there a mentor who was either Black or a woman or both? And how important do you think it is to have mentors sharing that identity with you?
I'll start off. I was chemistry pre-med, and my first mentor was my chemistry professor, who was no nonsense. She was the one that, again, influenced me to go into chemistry. She's like, Corey, you have very like problem solving analytical skills. I think you would be very good at it. And so she was her and also my scholarship professor were the first two Black women PhDs that I had ever met. I hadn't met any before then. And so I think with them not only being, in this space in STEM, but also having a likeness to my mother or my grandmother, or being on me like they are my parents, helped me kind of stay that path and stay within STEM and within chemistry. And so when I got higher up, though, more of my mentors, they started to look less and less like me. They were men, and then they became white men or white women. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of us here when we get past a PhD stage or go into academia, and it's kind of hard for us to find each other. But I think the numbers are growing. We're doing better at like kind of sustaining that in STEM. I mean, there still needs to be much, much more improvement. But for me, definitely, I had my initial mentors were Black women, and I still talk to them to this day. I still go back to school for homecoming, and we have conversations about what I'm doing now or something on Facebook. And so for me, I think it's very important. And please, if you need to, seek out someone who you can like see that is familiar and that you can recognize and looks like you.
I would say yes, very much kind of similar to Corey. My first Black woman PhD was when I was in undergrad. It wasn't until my sophomore year, and she was a geneticist, and she was no nonsense. I remember when I thought that, academics came quite easy to me, especially in the early stages. But when I got to genetics, I was like, I know genetics. This isn't, and she taught genetics differently. Her way of teaching it was to get people to go to graduate school. So it wasn't regurgitating information. It was problem solving and critical thinking. And that was probably the first class and person who challenged me while I was in school. And it's important because a lot of times we listen to people who don't look like us and they tell us their stories, and we kind of look and we're like, I didn't get that. I had to dig and find some scholarships. No, I don't have the extra money to go to this program because I'm paying for school out of pocket, or I barely have this scholarship. Getting higher up in my education, the women did become few and far between. But I will say that coming to Mississippi, I was really nervous about it because I know I'm in the Deep South. People are a lot different. I thought coming to the Deep South meant I would see a lot more people like me. And then Mississippi State, I got here, and I think we might have, for the total enrollment, it's less than 10% of our professors are African American, and even less than that for African American women. So sitting on the diversity council, I even found out that there's a chance that students in our university never have a Black professor ever. And this is talking about undergrads and taking it on into graduate school. Thankfully, I was able to find those few Black professors. And, even if they're not in my same department, the fact that they're Black women and they have PhDs, the journey is not too much different from there. The process is still very much the same. So I'm grateful for the women that I was able to find. And then eventually finding STEM Noir really opened up the gates, because there are a number of resources available for me now that I don't have to say, I don't know a Black woman in this, because sitting on this panel, we have a plethora of Black women who have PhDs, so are in the STEM field that can help.
Yeah, I was that student who never had a Black faculty member in undergrad, except for I did have, not a Black STEM faculty. I had one Black faculty member my entire undergraduate career, and that was in my African American history class. I had no mentor in undergrad, woman, male, Black, white, and I really feel like I suffered academically because of that, because they talk a lot about first generation students who are the first in their families to go to college. Well, in my perspective, there's also such a thing as like a first generation STEM student, and people who are going to school to study STEM for the first time, and their families are not from STEM backgrounds, and they can't give you the information that you need in order to be successful as a person in STEM. And so that was my experience. Both of my parents have college degrees, however, they were not in STEM. And so they couldn't tell me, hey, you should look into undergraduate research, or, here are some things you should do to try to raise your grades. I didn't get a mentor until I went to graduate school, and it was a white woman, but she was an ally. And I feel like if you can find somebody who can be an ally, who is still just as supportive, to this day, she's still my mentor. I go to her for everything. And she really was the person who supported me and told me all the things that nobody else told me to do. She pushed me, she encouraged me to go to conferences and to do research. And she took a chance on me because my undergrad GPA was trash, to be honest. And she called me. I was on the wait list to get into grad school. And she said straight up, she said, "What happened? Let me know what happened." And I told her exactly. And she really believed me. She was like, "Well, I think you deserve another chance," because she could see, like, I had an internship my senior year. So she could see that even though academically I wasn't as successful as I would have hoped I would have been, I was trying. Like, I had work ethic, I was ambitious. And, she knew that I was willing to do anything to turn it around. So she took me into her lab. And literally to this day, she puts me in front of everybody. She's like, "Here's my student." I mean, she's not my student anymore, but she's a professor now. But, she makes those connections for me that nobody else did when I was in undergrad. And that truly was key. I credit her with my success to this day.
Thank you. That's beautiful. All right. Well, your next question is, what advice do you have for a girl who wants to be a part of coding or programming?
Just like I said earlier, you can definitely find kits and Arduino kits that you can get delivered to your home that you can work on. Now there are a lot more initiatives to get Black women into coding, like Black Girls Code. And there's also STEM Lingo, which was actually launched by a Cornell alum that I know. And so these are kits that you can, again, get sent to your house, and you can start from there, and online platforms where you can start to take classes for free to learn how to code. And so there's just all these, now it's just a plethora of information out there. You have YouTube University. I mean, you can look GitHub. There's just all these academies, these little things you can do that you can just get on and just start coding. So those are just some of the resources that you can use in order to start coding and programming.
Additionally, you can also use your local library. I know that a lot of people don't think about the library anymore, but through one of my organizations, Minorities in Ag, Natural Resources, and Related Sciences, we volunteer at the library to teach students how to code. I am not in computer programming. I'm not a computer scientist. And I thought that was a stipulation before going in. I said, I don't think this is a good idea for us because, again, as the name says, ag and natural resources. And then we went into the training. And when I tell you that the kits that they had, one, you're teaching students, you're teaching children from the young age where they are learning how to be creatives. And then you're learning how to bring yourself back down to that level to be able to identify with these students. So essentially, you end up learning the same programming and coding that they did while teaching them and learning ways to make it relatable so that they can catch on.
Thank you. And I will also say, look into InTech for Girls. So that is a summer program that is specifically for young ladies who are interested in coding. And then as well as a number of different things. So like First Robotics, that combines the software side of like the coding and programming aspect with the hardware side. And different teams they combine students very differently based on interest. But that's also a good way for your student to get involved with coding if that's something that they're interested in. All right. Our next question is, what advice do you have for a girl who wants to be a forensic anthropologist?
Kelly, you got that one.
Okay, so the first thing I would recommend, if you are talking about in terms of what to study once you get to undergrad. So when you get to undergrad, you want to study either biology or you can major in anthropology. If you major in anthropology, I would definitely concentrate more on the biological anthropology. You want to kind of shy away from the cultural side of anthropology, because if you're going to be a forensic anthropologist, that scientific side is going to be really, really important. And then when you get to the graduate level, most forensic anthropologists actually go through to getting a PhD. That's one thing we tell a lot of our students. There's a lot of fields you can go into within forensic science that doesn't require a PhD, but anthropology is one of them that requires a PhD and also a board certification following the PhD. Toxicology is another one that requires a PhD often. And then if you're interested in anthropology and you are still in like the K through 12 arena, just doing any type of forensic science camp, trying to get connected with, one thing I was going to talk about on my social media page today is something called a body farm. And there's a lot of anthropologists who work at body farms, and some of them will allow you to either ask them questions or interview them, or maybe even get a tour to kind of get a feel for if that's even a field you want to go into. There's a lot of different things that forensic anthropologists do, but you want to get an idea for if you're really interested in it, and if so, what route do you want to take? Do you want to go the route where you go like all the way to the FBI and you're working for the FBI and doing forensic anthropology? Or do you want to work in academia? I would say most forensic anthropologists work in academia. You're not going to find a lot of forensic anthropologists who actually work full-time for a crime lab or work for the FBI. So the FBI has like a handful of them. Most forensic anthropologists are professors at universities, and they are usually just anthropologists primarily, and they do kind of forensics on the side. There's not a ton of anthropologists who are just doing forensic anthropology alone.
All I know is the show Bones. That's like one of my favorite shows to watch. And it's about a forensic anthropologist that works for the Jefferson Institute, and she solves all of these murders. And I just turn out every time I watch that show. So if you want to see watch Bones.
And the other thing I would mention too, I'm glad you said that, check into the Smithsonian, because the Smithsonian also has programs where you could do internships there, working with their bone sets or their skull sets, even in the high school area. So, and the worst that could happen when you ask somebody about coming to shadow them or coming to intern is they could say no. So go on LinkedIn, search forensic anthropologists, and just send them a message and say, hey, if your 10th grader is interested, say, my daughter's really interested in forensic anthropology. Could she shadow you? Could she interview you? Could she do a FaceTime or a Zoom session? Because that's really going to be the best way to get those questions you have answered.
Awesome. So our next question is, what clubs and activities, if any, did you do in college that made you discover a new skill or passion?
Ooh, I'll go because I brought up one. So for me, manners, minorities in ag, natural resources, and related sciences was and still is my home, because there aren't a lot of ag spaces for minorities. When you look at it, you have FFA, and given the history of that program, it kind of, it gives you kind of a weird feel, a shout out to my Black women who are able to push through with FFA. But for me, joining Manners really helped me get in front of the people that I, going into my career, thought I wanted to be like. So taking, the advice of Kelly, being able to intern and being able to shadow people really helped me really hone in on how I would be able to develop my career path and what path I needed to be on. So without Manners, I don't think that I would actually be in this space, because I wanted to stop after my master's. And with Manners, I got recruited for my PhD program. So clubs, activities, they can help you get your foot in the door.
I know for me, NSBE, National Society of Black Engineers, is a really big one. The conference is amazing. Fortunately, I don't have it this year, but that was one of the kind of major conferences that helped me transition from chemistry into biomedical engineering. So once I could see like different applications of what I could do with my chemistry background, that definitely helped. And just meeting like-minded individuals who look like me, dressed up trying to get jobs was definitely something impactful. I do also want to say sororities are actually, I think, a really big influence on a lot of us. There are a lot of women. I'm a Delta, so I know a lot of Deltas who are in the STEM space, and we all try to support each other, and AKAs as well. SG Rho, Zetas, we are all in this STEM space, and we like to uplift and hold up to each other. So I think that really helps with kind of keeping us in this network of support, and also learning what each other does and what our fields are. And then next thing you know, you might transition into a different field. And so I think those two are definitely one of the big ones. And then we have Biomedical Engineering Society, and we have our local chapter. And that's where I realized I really like to do outreach with young girls in STEM. We had a Girl Scout Engineering Day where we would do engineering activities with the girls, and then also doing things with the local community as well, and doing tutoring within those communities. So that's where I found my passion for volunteering. So definitely just try your hands in little pots, little clubs here. You may not like all of them. You might join some, not join others, but definitely there's many, many clubs and activities that you can do.
All right, thank you. And I will also say, before we move on, is that some of these clubs also have chapters or things that you can get involved with prior to being in college. So some of them do have K through 12 efforts or pre-college efforts. There are programs that organizations may put on that you can be involved with. So definitely look into like Nesby Junior. I know Deltas have the Delta Gyms. There's a bunch of different programs that you can get involved with even before you get into college, and then possibly continue on with once you get into college. So don't feel the need to wait till you get there to get involved with some of the organizations you kind of have already seen to be interested in. All right, our next question is, what advice do you have for a girl who wants to be many things?
Be them all.
Do it, girl. Do it. Do it, Rita. You do it, Rita. You do everything.
That's what Black women do. We just sit around. I'm gonna get another degree. I feel like doing something else today. Change my career path. I would suggest mostly is finding out and knowing particularly who you are and if that career really speaks to you. And so, like, who are you as a person? What do you like? What do you desire? What do you need? I think once you kind of find these things out, your career path will kind of lead you down that. But you're not limited to one thing. You can be an inventor, you can be an author, you can be a speaker, and you can be everything else in between. I mean, look at Oprah, she does anything. Look at Beyonce, they do any and everything. They have many titles and many hats. It's just making sure that you can manage all of that and still stay sane.
Mm-hmm. And I would say, trying to get exposed to each of those things as much as you can, because there's some things that you may think you want to do, but then once you actually start doing it, you're like, oh, this wasn't as cool as I thought it was. Like, we have people who think that about forensics. Like, they see the show CSI, then everybody wants to be a forensic scientist, and then they come and they realize that about 90 of their 120 credits are all STEM classes, and they're like, maybe I'm not as interested in this as I thought it was, or it's not as glamorous as it was on the show. Wear the white suits and the Hummers and the Versace glasses. So, and trying to find, ways to get exposed to people who are actually doing it and seeing if you can shadow them, because some of those things might get crossed off of your list. And you're like, oh, that's not exactly what I thought it was going to be. But then, yeah, of course, you can do it all. I say that all the time. I mean, probably I'd say it too much, but I mean, I've been, professor, I was a group fitness instructor, I'm a mom, I'm a wife, I'm a PhD student, I have I'm a consultant on the side. I mean, I do all different kinds of things because I don't feel like I have to be limited to, one box. I have that one main thing that makes sure I can pay my bills, but, I have all the other things on the side that I do if I want to.
I was actually going to say that too. I was going to mention that about you specifically, Kelly. Rita, if you need some really good examples, most of the women that you see online or on social media are all multifaceted. For example, all of us here, we're all in the STEM field, we're also science communicators. That's how you came to know who we are. Kelly and myself, we're also faculty. We also teach on the side. Kelly just said she does some consulting. Do you teach too, Rashida? So Rashida teaches also. Corey has a lot going on her side with STEM and modeling and all this other kind of thing. You know, if you catch up to her and her IG. Chandria is president of some of the programs that she works with. So if you want some examples, or if someone says, hey, I'm not too sure if you can do all of it, yes, you can, sis. And you watch us do it every single day. Do it.
And I mean, just to piggyback off of everything that they said, the way that I met these women is through STEM Noir, and it let me know that there's so much more that we can do. I had been following Corey for so long just because I was like, Black woman, you know, and then through following Corey, you know, you find out Corey's got this whole movement on this is what a scientist looks like. And then, you know, talking to Chanel is doing chocolate. You know, and you think about chocolate and it's like, but you're in STEM, and people don't think about the science that goes into making chocolate. Mm-hmm. Meeting everybody on here, you have some entrepreneurs, you have some people who are very passionate about volunteerism. You don't have to be limited. If your time lets you do it, first, make sure that you take time for yourself. That's the first deposit that you make. And then everything else is up for grabs. So don't let anybody limit you, because you can do it all. You can.
Amazing. All right. Our next question is, do you think a STEM career is as important in poor countries as it is in developed countries? Someone from a STEM program in Haiti.
So, Naitana, I see that you and I think Shyla is also from Haiti as well. I'm going to take this one first, if you don't mind, ladies. I want to speak to you, particularly Naitana, because I did my dissertation in Haiti. And so one of the takeaways, or one of the tangible things that we ended up doing, is I was able to form with another team. This wasn't me by myself, it's a collaborative effort. We were able to form what's called an MOU, a memorandum of understanding, between Morgan State University, which is the HBCU where I graduated from, a doctorate degree, and the University of Artibonite and Gonaïves, which is in Haiti. And so Dr. Jean-Odile Etienne, Dr. Etienne, who served as the president of UPAG, I believe he's now in the Department of Education. We are working together to create other programs for allied health, and particularly in STEM. So what I would say to you is, if you have access, or if you're able to get his email address, or somehow contact him, please seek out Dr. Jean-Odile Etienne in Gonaïves, Haiti, because I do believe he will be a super duper resource for you to get some information about how that's going to be up and coming. Because from that MOU, he's now working with 6 other universities in Haiti. And hopefully what we're going to do is spread this across the entire country. And with the STEM development programs and some allied health programs, and then getting some more mobile clinics going. So I think that'll be a good resource for you. So yes, 1, it is important, super important. And then 2, hopefully that's a resource you can use to get yourself into the pipeline, hopefully.
And I will say, I don't like to call them poor countries. I like to call them underdeveloped countries. STEM is important. During my master's, I worked with a program called Project Peanut Butter, and it's based out of Africa. If you've ever seen the Donate to Africa commercials and you see the babies who have the bloated stomachs, Project Peanut Butter came together to bring in all of these NGOs and companies to basically develop a peanut butter product that can be fed to these babies. That once, when the science and research went into it, we found out that when these babies are fed this peanut butter product, they very rarely go back to that level of malnutrition that they reached prior to. So if we weren't able to go and do this research, if there were not scientists that were already in Africa who were very passionate about this project, we wouldn't be able to make these moves through STEM in these underdeveloped countries to give them the things that we need, that we take advantage of. For us, a lot of us probably have peanut butter sitting in the cabinet that we don't even touch. But to think about the fact that that same peanut butter product is what they need in Africa lets you know how important STEM is. In order for us to do that peanut work, we needed farmers. We needed people who were fluent in the language. We needed people who understood what the soil type was, because we knew that not necessarily the peanuts that were there wouldn't do well. So we needed to be able to grow peanuts that we'd bred, but needed the background information. If we didn't have a STEM person to do this, we wouldn't be able to help those babies. So it is so important to make those connections, and to, if you are interested in STEM, there's so much you can do to give back to these countries.
Can we double back to that too? You said something, I'm sorry, I'm getting tongue-tied. You said something very, very important, Chandria, and I want to highlight this, the use of the term poor. And this is also a part of my background and literature review for my dissertation. When we talk about third world countries and poor, we need to also understand the reason why, or the lasting effects of what's happening, is due to colonization. Most of these countries we now deem third world or poor were colonized. They were very well off by themselves before there was interference. And so now we have this thing called paternalization or paternalistic relationships, where we have NGOs and other orgs coming into these countries, and they're making promises and giving monies, and they're guaranteeing funds. But then what happens is, when the benefactors dry up, or those funds dry up, they pull out and they leave the country no better than they were when they first came in. And so that's also part of what we're trying to do, is get some self-sustainability. But it's super important. I'm so glad you said that. When we use terms like poor countries or third world, these are colonized countries, and the state of their current state of being right now is a direct result of colonization, not to any fault of their own. So thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you for sharing. All right, our next question is, what advice do you have for a girl who wants to get started in STEM fields, but who is always discouraged by those around her?
I'll take that. I was just going to say, first of all, ignore them. Second of all, do your best to surround yourself with a community of people who will support you. So we've talked about this example of STEM Noir forever, but literally, I know this is going to sound crazy, but before I came onto Instagram as my handle, which is Kelly the Scientist, I don't even know if I knew any Black women in STEM. That sounds crazy, but personally, I couldn't even name. Well, I have one friend from elementary school, I think, but I mean, the fact that I have to think about it that hard is really sad. And just being a part of this community, a lot of these people I have never even met in person, but they are more supportive than some of my closest friends when it comes to my career professionally. And just having that support and people saying, girl, you got this, you can do this, or I experienced it too, and here's what I did. That is so important, for you to distance yourself from people who clearly don't want anything good for you if they're discouraging you, because you can do anything. You can do STEM. You can be whatever you can be whatever you want to be. And so, there are all different types of communities that are there to support you. One example is I'll plug my STEM program, but our summer STEM program is called Females of Color and Those Underrepresented in STEM. And what's beautiful about this program, we get people who say, oh, your program's racist. Why are you just making it for girls of color? But this is why, because females of color and those underrepresented in STEM, in my opinion, is like a baby STEM noir. Like, it's a community of girls where they all are diverse. They're all girls of color. They're all girls, and they don't feel that pressure from being around people who are like, why are you doing STEM? STEM is stupid. Like, all of these crazy things that people have to say about STEM. And I know we're not the only program. There's programs like this all over the country. You just have to search for them. So that would be my recommendation, is to ditch the negative people, and find you a community of people who are going to support you.
And I'll say, this is something, I don't want you to think that it's something that changes over time. I think that we can all say, Kelly highlighted it, the higher up that you go, the more that people are going to try to discourage you. And you have to be able to recognize, is it them discouraging you, or are they afraid because they didn't have what you had to step outside the box and go get what you wanted? So if you ask yourself that question every time someone says, don't do STEM, and you say, well, why not? And they can't give you an answer if they're saying, well, girls don't do STEM, or there are not a lot of you in that space, then that's your time to prove them wrong and show them, because it's different to say, don't do STEM, or don't take on this career because what about the jobs? You know, that's different. That's something that they want you to think about when you pick your career path. But if there's no substance to it, don't worry about it. Prove them wrong.
All right. Our next question is, what equity-based considerations do you think are lacking from graduate training?
A lot. We have this conversation a lot between people that are in grad school and outside of grad school, women of color. And I think the major kind of disconnect is where the recruiting happens and where it's coming from. I feel a lot of these universities that are doing this graduate training don't go to NSBE or don't go to SHPE or don't go to SACNAS. And these are where our engineers and scientists of color go. Specifically for engineering. There's other conferences, but I'm just speaking from my experience. And so when you're not there showing face, interacting with, you know, the students who could potentially be coming to your university, they're not going to come because they don't know about the opportunities. They don't know about the funding. They don't know about possibly the mentors as well. And so for us at that level, we always really try to push for us, like, let's get a booth at this place. Let's get a booth. Just send me there. You don't even have to get a booth. Just send me there and I will recruit somebody to our program. But it's the universities or these institutions that lack the actual motivation to get this done. But we're always trying to push them. We're always trying to call it out. We're always just trying to make sure we get people to see, like, hey, graduate school is an option and you can come here and hopefully we can be here for the same amount of years and I help you get through just like you helped me get through. But I think a lot of it is actually having the initiatives in place to recruit more people of color and specifically for us Black women to get into these degree programs.
I'm going to speak just as far as graduate students, as far as the training that we receive. Graduate students, I believe, should be in the same trainings that you're putting faculty staff in. Because if we don't receive that training, we can't call out our faculty and staff when they're wrong. If we don't know what they're actually receiving, I can't fault you for not being sensitive if I don't know if you're receiving sensitivity training. But if you and I both sit in the same sensitivity training and I know that you got some kind of background on this, when I call you out, it makes it even better because I have points that I can say, hey, when we were in this training, we talked about X, Y, and Z. And yet here we are in this program and you're doing the exact opposite. Mm-hmm. Additionally, and this is something I just learned about because of my best friend and roommate, culturally responsive teaching is important. If you are, and this is on every level, I don't care if you're teaching high school, college, if you're going into training in industry, if you are going to a high school that is 90% Black, you cannot use white examples in those spaces because those students are not going to grasp that concept. And that's a part of culturally responsive teaching. So if they don't relate to the material, they're not going to get it. And that's something that I think everybody we're lacking: equity-based considerations, culturally responsive teaching, because evolutions happen. The textbooks that I had in high school are not the textbooks that need to be used now, because I go back to these high schools and they're more diverse than my high school, so it needs to be an upgrade so that we can better connect with students.
Totally agree. Even in my area of cancer drug delivery research, we are now, I think, more acknowledging the under-enrollment of people of color in clinical trials, the representations of these groups that people are done that do not represent the US population, only represents a certain part. And so different cultures, different people, different races may respond to drugs differently or have different effects. And we're seeing now there's huge health disparities between African Americans and with COVID or with cancer or with heart disease. And so I think now we're recognizing this a little bit more, but we have to actually implement this when we actually do our clinical trials or do our data analysis and understand, okay, yeah, this is representative of only this group, but we're missing a whole nother part that we need to work on. And so I definitely think those are some of the things that need to be implemented, as well as at the graduate level. Specifically, I talk about this is tenure track faculty. I think, when you become tenured, basically you can't get fired. You can just unless you do something really egregious, you're going to have that position. And when you have these tenure faculty, they tend to do whatever they want at the expense of other people. And so I've been saying that we should implement more of a system of holding tenure faculty responsible for their actions, along with in order to maintain tenure, you also have to have sensitivity training. You also have to be culturally responsive. You also have to have these other factors other than just the fact that you're not going to lose your job. So again, it takes a long time to get these things rolling, but people are talking, and hopefully soon we'll see change.
And what ties into that is accountability. There has to be some type of accountability system in place. You can have all of these requirements, but what I want to see more at my university that I speak on all the time is, I understand you may be tenured. I understand you may be higher up admin. I understand you may be a director or chair, but I want to know if after you've checked all your boxes to say, see, look what we're doing for diversity, equity, and inclusion, I want to know what's the next set of boxes to follow up. What's the timeline, and how are people going to get checked if they don't follow it? Because if there's no accountability, they can go to all these trainings, they can check all the boxes and still not actually implement it in their everyday teaching and their everyday training. And so that's where I really see the issue from my perspective at the higher education level, that, you know, you can check the boxes but still not be accountable, and nothing really actually gets changed.
I think what would be really, really important, piggybacking off what Kelly is saying and kind of tying what everybody else is saying actually too. But I think when it comes to actually getting some deliverables, I know that in public health, when we have to do what's called an intervention program, when we submit a proposal for intervention to get a desired result, we need to provide a detailed evaluation plan with that as well. And what that means is we have to have a set of SMART goals, but at the very, very at minimum, we need to have some like, hey, we're looking for this desired result, but there's two things. Here are the set of things we're looking for that tell us we're getting that desired result. And then two, here's a timeline of implementation. So we can now keep ourselves accountable and on track to if this is working or not. And we have timeline check-ins along the way. And you can now look at longitudinally, you can see what is and what is not working because you're being held to a standard. So I think if we start implementing the same constraints we have when submitting grant proposals, if we start using that same kind of requirement to this diversity and inclusion training, we wouldn't have a problem. But it's open-ended, like Kelly said. We say, well, they say they're going to do this and the other, but there's no SMART goals attached to it, no deliverables attached to it, no timeline, and no expectations attached to it. Hold them accountable.
All right. So we have time for one more question, and we want to make sure that we keep this brief because we're going to wrap up in about 3 minutes. So our last question is, what are your favorite things about your careers?
My favorite thing about my career, a lot of people think that my career goes hand in hand with farming. I don't go outside. I work with plants. But I absolutely love that I get to work in a lab setting with air conditioner and there's no bugs flying around my head. But on the other side, I do like that I get to do things like this, interact with these women and you guys that are watching, and to just be able to mentor. That's one of the greatest takeaways from going into graduate school, is that you can be a mentor to almost anybody.
Would anyone like to share? Go ahead, Corey.
I think one of the favorite things I like about my career stage at where I'm at now is I'm very, very flexible as far as like schedule. So sometimes I may be in at like 5 o'clock in the morning, I may leave at 12, or I might go in at 3 and leave at 7. It just depends on what's going on that day. I like having that flexibility because I have other things that are going on in my life that I have to, attend to, or the speaking engagement. So having that flexibility just allows me to just do so many different things, but still, have my research and be, a productive member of my STEM field. And overall, I think it's interacting with scientists. I really am into problem solving and teamwork and working together to, reach a common goal. And so meeting so many different people from all over the world, so many different cultures, we just all come together. And at the end of the day, what we want to do is solve a problem, solve either cure cancer or, make cataracts go away or whatever it might be. And so I think that's like the most part that I enjoy about my career.
The thing I like the most about where you can read again.
No, go ahead. It's okay.
The thing I like the most about being a forensic scientist is feeling like I'm contributing to the justice system. It has a very really good feeling of you don't always know the end result of your case, but knowing that you did your best to either help a victim have closure, or one of my most favorite things is actually helping to exonerate somebody who's been falsely accused. And being a part of that, there's one DNA exoneration I was a part of that I think about all the time, where these 4 young men were accused of a crime, and 2 of them had been in jail for months. And I was able to participate in their exoneration, and that was really a great feeling to know that you can help on both sides of it. It's important to remember that people are victims on both ends, that a crime has occurred to them, but there are also people who are falsely accused of things all the time. And knowing that I can contribute to help both ends of the spectrum is a really great thing.
What I enjoy about my job now is having had the experience being in the lab and now being outside the lab. I've seen so many different parts to science. And so now being on the other side, I'm in what's called corporate science now. So instead of actually doing the experimentation, I'm now on the side that gets to look at the experiments and see if they're done properly and in order and determine what their results mean for human health and toxicology, what that looks like in the human body system. So that's what I enjoy, the other side of the science. Without the long lab hours, because, honey.
All right. Thank you, ladies, so much for sharing your experiences with us and spending your afternoon with us. We also like to thank everyone who was in attendance and who asked questions. It's unfortunate we weren't able to get to all of them, and there was so many great questions we weren't able to get to. But we would love to be able to host another panel for you all if you are interested in doing this again. You can also find each of these ladies, including myself, on stemnoir.org. You can reach out to us. I also know that some of our panelists have shared some of their handles, their social media handles, in the comments. So feel free to follow up with them via email or on social media, whichever is most convenient for you. So again, thank you to our panelists for joining us and sharing. Thank you, all of you who were able to participate this afternoon. And we wish you the best of luck and enjoy yourself, enjoy your weekend, stay safe. And
wash your hands and wear your mask.
Yes. Social distance.
And vote.
And vote.
Vote, be safe. We appreciate you guys. Thank you so much.